characteristic, an emphasis on the absolute faqr, darwishi, poverty, the neediness of human beings. The dry valley, what can it be if the rain doesn't fall? The ruined city without builders and an architect, what can it be? And that's what we are. Antumul fuqara'u ila Allah. You are the needy of Allah, the poor, the helpless. Now, this image that he starts with, the Wadi Khushki, the dry valley, this is one of the great oppositions, the great tensions, dialectics in the poetry of Mevlana. The dry and the wet, which again is Quranic, of course. أنزلنا من السماء ماء, it comes up again and again, doesn't it? And it's a reminder of Al-Muhi. Allah is the source of life, but not just the source of our physical life. وَمِنَ الْمَاءِ خَلَقْنَا جَعَلْنَا كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. From water we have created every living thing, but there is an inward meaning to this, which refers to the rain which comes upon the hearts. It's a good image because it shows how uncontrollable the process is. We can't make the rain fall any more than we can hope for salvation, or for Allah's rida, or for a karama, or to be born in a time of blessedness, or to have, there's so many things that we are indeed fuqara. What can we do? We hold our hands out, but the hands are empty. That's the whole point. When we make dua, we are showing Allah that our hands are empty. And that's the maqam al-faqr, the degree of helplessness. So dry, desiccated bones in need of this extraordinary thing that brings life. And in Mevlana's poetry, the body, the tan, is often compared to dust, because of course that's where it comes from. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ فِيهَا نُعِيدُكُمْ مِنْهَا نُخْرِجُكُمْ تَارَةً أُخْرَى. From it did we create you, to it shall we return you, from it shall we bring you out one more time. We have this close relationship to khaq, dust, clay. It's the nature of what we are. So that's what we are in ourselves. We will turn eventually to dry bones, rufat, dust again. And the rain represents ruh, spirit, rahmah, that which is enlivening, that which is indicative of being, of truth, of haqq, of meaning, of content, of reality. We had the bait yesterday in the other ghazal of Rumi, where he compares the spirit to raindrops falling upon the earth. You came down like raindrops upon the khaq. It's the same word, the dry, dusty roof of the world. In Central Asia and Anatolia, people would have flat roofs made of clay, and that's what we are. So in a sense we are the clay, but simultaneously we are also the drops, the water that comes upon the clay. So what are we really? Are we this matter? Or are we the reality of ourselves? Or is it some very subtle, strange, constitutional mingling of the two? What is the mind-body relation? Well, philosophers stagger as they try to deal with that connection. But we know it's fundamental. And so if rain is our reality coming to the other dimension of our reality, quite often in Mevlana's poetry it is a symbol of the mediated mercy. So rain represents revelation. In some of his poems, Mevlana describes himself as the dry earth, and Shams is the rain that falls upon the dry earth and of course brings all manner of beautiful things, including the rose of divine recollection into play. So here's another example, just in the English from the Divan. When the clouds of your love rain down their incomparable pearls. 1,000 beautiful forms grow up from the heart and the spirit. Just as when rain comes down from heaven and stream, pool, and limpid water are covered with tiny domes, that sometimes comes up, the image of water falling on the surface, the rain falling on the surface of the water, and little bubbles. That's what we are. Mysterious. Is it real? How long does it last? That's our life. And then it disappears back into being, back into the unknowable, and more appear. So sometimes, again, in Mevlana's poetry, we find a comparison of the Holy Prophet to a cloud. The Arabs are like in the desert, suffering from darkness and ignorance, dryness, drought, and the Holy Prophet ﷺ is a jewel-carrying cloud, which in his poem stretches from Istanbul to India, shedding its gems over the hearts of the Muslims. This is often also identified with another of his polarities, which is that between suffering and healing, or between misfortune, difficulty, hardship on the one hand, and mercy on the other. He speaks of zahma and rahma. The world is full of hassle. What we crave is rahma, mercy, that which makes sense of it all and which gives us hope and shows us the meaning. And here again, one of his favorite images is the thunderstorm. And we'll see this, inshallah, when we look at the Husn Ashq poem, that beauty and love are born in the middle of a thunderstorm. And that means a lot. Ancient Arabian imagery even. Everything is dry, maybe there's a dust storm. Suddenly, just when it seems like the end of time, there's an incredible thunderclap and the heavens open and there is the rain. And so the idea of the mercy coming in the midst of the jalal or the rigor is another very important one. And again, on Saturday we looked at that strange hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or will say, "Ena al-mutahabbuna bi jalali." Where are those who loved one another for the sake of my majesty, or in the context of my majesty? The ulama have said a lot about this, but it has something to do with it's through hardship that love comes to fruition. And of course, in our tradition of metaphorical romance from the Layla wa Majnun stories, on Husn Ashq is, in a sense, the consummation of all of that. You have this idea that love comes at a price. You weep tears of blood. It's through the rigor, the extraordinary pain of separation, misfortune. Layla's encampment has disappeared through that hardship, that zahma, that eventually the fullness of the consummation takes place. So he uses this image: we are like the dry valley. Allah's mercy is like the rain. And then in the same line, he says that we are like a ruined city, and the creator is the architect. And again, another big image in our civilization, in our poetry generally, the idea of the shahr, or the city. And this is another ambiguous one, because it's not really clear whether this is a good or a bad thing, just as it is the case with human beings. وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, we guided him to the two paths, but just being human doesn't mean that you're good or bad in your current reality. It's just a kind of like a city. Who knows what goes on in the city, but the form is there. So we have a rich idea in our civilization of the city being a place that's morally ambiguous, but also a place where things happen. And we saw his image of the bazaar, the marketplace. A lot of marketplaces in Rumi, and it's not just the place where you expend the coins of your capital in order to, as it were, anticipate Allah's generosity in granting you salvation in eternity. Bazaar is a place where things are on display, where things are shown. So he has a long, complicated ghazal, which is a strange conversation between the roots of a tree. And the roots of the tree are saying, look at us, we're amazing, we go down and we do all of these things and we're perfectly formed, but nobody knows about us. Nobody can see what we are, and we aspire to our bazaar, which doesn't mean they want to be on sale in a market. It means a place of exposition, a place where they are to be seen. So a city is a place, a mazhar, a locus for the manifestation of different possibilities, specifically human possibilities. The city is a human entity. So the famous poem of Hajj Bayram Veli, who is the patron saint, if you like, of the city of Ankara, Çalabım bir şar yaratmış, iki cihan arasında, bakacak didar görünür, ol şehrin kinaresinde. My Lord has created a city between two worlds. He's talking about a number of things here, but he's really talking about human beings or the human soul as a city. And when you look closely, you can see at the edge of that city the loved one, Didar, the beloved, or Shehrin Kinaresinde. So it's ambiguous. Do you want to be in the center of it, or do you want to be outside it? And if you look at the place where we are now, why is it that the big Mevlevi Hanes of Istanbul are not in the city center, but are kind of on the edges? The biggest one, of course, is the one in Galata, which is not in Istanbul at all. Traditionally, the Asian side is the city of Üsküdar. On the other side of the Khalij, or the Golden Horn, you have Galata or Pera. And this side is Istanbul, but we're outside the city's gate, so we're not in Istanbul here, we're outside, as in Hajj Bayram's poem. And the Sultan, when he came, would ceremonially leave the city. There was a special ceremony for him leaving the city gates, and he would come to the gate, sit up there to watch the dhikr, the sama'. And the reason why they did this was to get away from the disturbances, the worldliness of the city. An ambiguous place of vice. So here's a little poem that I like. Kim ki İstanbul içre tevbe edip dirse bir dahi içmezem sahba i'timad elemen sezmü anen Galata ihtimali var zira. The great ambiguity of Istanbul's traditional geography was there's all kinds of, like for instance, if you were a woman and you'd had an argument with your husband and you went off in a huff, you'd go to Üsküdar over the sea until he'd seen reason, then you'd come back again. Lots of sort of stories about that. Mother-in-law is always in Üsküdar. But on the other side of the Golden Horn, you have the Europeans, you have the Christians, you have the Greeks, the Armenians, the Italians, so you have alcohol. No alcohol in this part of town, but there's alcohol over there. So in this poem he's saying, watch out for the one who says, I made my tawbah in Istanbul, because Galata is not so very far away. And the pun is, of course, Galata is like Galat, which means mistake, because the place is full of brothels and gambling dens and alcohol. So, and that's our condition. We can repent in this wonderful place, but there's always the possibility of backsliding. So that's the ambiguity of the city in this. But it's also, of course, an extraordinary place of learning and blessings. If you want to study with the ulama, generally you go to the city. So if you went to Ayub Sultan yesterday, you've seen perhaps the line of Turkish poetry next to the mihrab. Yetişmez mi bu şehrin halkının bir ni'meti bari? Habibi Ekremin Yara Aba Ayyub al-Ansari. Is it not sufficient pride for the people of this city that they should have amongst them Abu Ayyub al-Ansari? If it was just him that was here, that would be enough to make this an extraordinary city. So there's blessings and miracles here as well. Lots of poems from the ulama about İstanbul. İlm ile marifete cai kabul olmaz illa ki eğer İstanbul mevlidi menşei eshab-ı himem terbiyethane esnaf-ı himem ne kadar varsa eshab-ı kemal hep İstanbul'da bulur istiklal. So on. They're always going on about this. Sometimes poems written to kind of boast of the fact that they've got big jobs in the big madrasas in the cities where their sort of younger brothers are off in some little town in Anatolia or Bosnia. However much you may travel as far as Kabul, ilm can only be found in Istanbul. It is the birthplace and the place of growing of the people of true determination and the training ground of the different professions of all of the nations. However much scholars may develop in other places, their full independence as scholars only takes place in Istanbul. Lots of boasting poetry like this. One more. Bir kanini amdır ki anın gevheri ikbal, bir bağı iremdir ki gülü izzu aladır. Herkes erişir anda muradına aninçün, dergahları melce erbab-ı recadır. Kalay-ı maarif satılır suklarında, bazar-ı hüner me'deni ilmi ulamadır. Which is by Nedim, who's one of the great, really fancy Baroque Ottoman poets. It is the mine of blessings. In the mine of blessings, this is the most favored jewel. In the gardens of Iram, this is the most beautiful rose. Whoever comes here shall find that which he desires. Its dergahs, its places of Sufi gathering mainly, are the place of resort of people of high aspirations. The treasures of knowledge are on sale in all of its markets. It is the quarry of ilm and of the ulama. Okay, just another example of how the city is an ambiguous place. Countryside, sometimes a place which is healthy and pure, rather like the ancient Arabs had the idea that the desert around Makkah was a healthier place for children to be brought up in, but the city is where it's at. So that's the ambiguity of the human soul in the complex metaphorical language that these poets like. You have to have the city, you have to have Bani Adam, it's what everything is about, but this is where there's dirt in the streets and there's women of easy virtue as well as the great ulama. It's the ambiguity of the human condition. Okay, enough Ottoman poems. Let's go back to the Ghazal. Verse number 4. بغیر خدمت ما که مشارق شادی است نادید خلق و نبیناد ز شادی آثاری. So again, this is the voice of heaven. Apart from serving me, khidmat ma, which is the rising places of joy, mashariq shadi ist, people have never seen and never will see any sign of joy. Again, characteristic of Mevlana. You're looking for happiness, you pursue dunya, you're on the wrong track. The true joy is to be found here. And this is again Quranic. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. Whoever turns away from remembering me shall have a kind of miserable, sorry life. And will be resurrected on the last day blind. So Khidmatima, serving Allah, is mashariqi shadist, is the rising places of joy. It's a powerful image. The sun will rise, something extraordinary will happen through this khidmah. Serve Allah and something extraordinary will happen, but there's different kinds of, that's why he's saying mashariq, not just one place. There's not one possible outcome of a sacrifice that you make for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a range of different possibilities. And of course, in the Quran, again, you have this idea of the Easts and the Wests. رَبُّ الْمَشَارِقِ وَالْمَغَارِبِ فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِرَبِّ الْمَشَارِقِ وَالْمَغَارِبِ. I swear by the Lord of the Easts and the Wests, because at different times of year, the sun rises at a different point in the horizon. So the mashriq, the rising place, wonderful symbol of the appearance of the divine light. It's not one mashriq, but there's a variety of them. Don't think that there's only one type of spiritual wayfaring. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has different patterns of self-manifestation. So this is bekhidmati ma, through serving me. That's what makes the sun rise in this image, or it is the sun rises consequently upon that. How can we serve him? Well, this is just another way of talking about ibadah. In some religions they talk about divine service when they talk about worship. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I've created jinn and men only to worship me. That's what we're here for. Everything else is kind of misunderstanding, just passing the time of day. Not so smart, given that our lives always diminish and never increase. the story of Junayd al-Baghdadi, who heard a ice seller on the streets of Baghdad saying, I can't remember the Arabic, help the one whose capital is diminishing. And he faints because he realizes that's the state of us all, our lives constantly getting less. So with that capital, what can we do? Again, it's the naqtit, or the coinage with which we trade in order to have some possibility of profit in this bazaar, a place where things are on display. Now, these gifts and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, which lead to different kinds of joy, are distractions if the joy that we find in our professions and in our chosen way of life is not an expression of or a derivation of or leads on to that true shadi, that true happiness. So if you're looking to sanctify your vocation as a medic or a lawyer or whatever it might be, see if you can link somehow, this is where inner reflection is helpful, see if you can link the satisfaction that you get from that job not to the ego's desire to be praised by colleagues or to be in line for promotion or just to feel satisfied that you've written a report well, but instead to link it to the higher happiness, to make it an expression of the dhikrullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's very important for Muslims working in the busy modern workplace, because historically most people who are in the workplace belonged to guilds, and the guilds were sacred sort of fraternities, the asnaf. If you were in Istanbul a couple of hundred years ago and you wanted to learn anything, bricklayer or tasbih maker or whatever it might be, you would join a guild before you're allowed to do anything, and the guild's degrees, 7-year initiation, involved spiritual practices connecting that guild to a particular type of symbolism. They just don't tell you the symbolism of anything when you go to a modern university. It's just mechanical inculcation of information. It's important for us, when we find joy in what we do, to turn that into, or to find ways of connecting that to the joy that we find in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise it's in opposition to our religious life, in which case it just swings and roundabouts. We pray and we're happy with the dhikrullah, and then it's back to the operating theatre or whatever it might be, and we go down again. It shouldn't be like that. It should be a continuum of going up. Of course, the nature of things is that we have ups and downs, but the net movement should be upwards. Otherwise, we'll end up feeling disconsolate. So in his prose work, the Fihi Ma Fihi, Rumi says this: in man there is a love, a pain, an itch, and a desire such that if 100,000 worlds were to become his property, he would still gain no rest or ease. These people occupy themselves thoroughly with every kind of craft, skill, and position. They learn astronomy, medicine, and other things, but they do not find peace of mind, because their goal has not been attained. After all, the beloved is called heart's ease, since the heart finds ease through him. So how could it find ease and peace truly through others? All these entertainments and goals are like a ladder. Since the rungs of a ladder are no place to take up residence, but exist only so that you can pass on, happy is he who quickly comes to himself and to awareness. Then the long road becomes short, and he does not waste his life on the ladder's rungs. And here the idea in Rumi of happiness, of really doing something that is purposive, that has an end, that isn't just the golden handshake and then the retirement and then the care home, but is moving up towards something extraordinary, the true happiness, rather than the anxiety of the person who thinks that even after all of these little drip-fed increments of esteem in the modern workplace, eventually it's all for nothing. But instead, the one who genuinely has a sense that he's going somewhere and has a little foretaste of that destination in the garden of his own dhikr, that he starts to taste what the Quran speaks of as wilaya. And the Quran does speak of wilaya in terms of happiness. Sa'ada in our vocabulary is another way of saying salvation. In fact, we don't really say salvation very much unless we're in Ibn Sina's tradition. We speak of najat. But really sa'ada is salvation. Happiness is salvation. Shaqawa is damnation. And another way of putting it is that happiness means closeness. Closeness to reality is what gives us happiness. Distance from reality is what makes us stressed out and agitated. And the Quran speaks of this in terms of أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. The wali is the one who is close. And no fear is upon them, neither shall they grieve. In other words, they're pretty happy. Despite all of the stuff that is dumped on them, they're happy. They are the true joyful ones, and that is how they have these apparently miraculous reservoirs of energy, just from happiness. It's like the happiness of the child on the beach that runs from dawn until dusk, and you've no idea how the energy is possible. But the child is just so happy to be there that it's just the happiness generates that energy, and that simple, fitri, spontaneous happiness is connected to the happiness of the true believer, who is energized. And if you're going to understand the extraordinary accomplishments of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, think about them as representatives of what the Turks call the Asri Sa'adat, the age of happiness. Their victories, their energy, their transforming of the world came from that extraordinary dynamism called human happiness. And that is, in the Mevlevi tradition in particular, the reason why they turn. Rumi was so delighted with his Lord that he stood and he turned, according to the story, outside the goldsmith shop. He heard the tinkling of the goldsmith's hammer on the gold, and it just reminded him of the name of his Lord, Allah, Allah, Allah. And he stood up in the market and started to turn. That's joy. And we don't have enough of that joy, I think, in our communities nowadays. We have the kind of zahma, agitation, lack of it. That's just because of the weakness of our connection to the one who continues to be al-Qarib. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to look at the world, and we can find it in that. We can find it in nature, the deep joyful stillness that comes through the contemplation of Allah's signs. Shaykh Sa'di says, "Bejihani khurram as anom ke jihan khurram as ost." I am delighted in this world because this world is delighted in him. The happiness that the world displays, the joy of the flower, of the beauty of young people, the delight of children, the joy that is intrinsic in the nature of the world. We are in this place between the tombs of Sayyid Nizam and Merkez Effendi. This whole district is called Merkez Effendi. We might talk a little bit more about them later on. Merkez Effendi is a very, very popular mazar, and you should walk just up the road, and it's the brick minaret that you can see from outside. It's an extraordinary place. Merkez Effendi lived in the early 16th century, in the time of Qanuni Sultan Suleiman, and his sheikh was Sunbul Effendi. Merkez Effendi was a fairly ragged, rather unremarkable dervish, but he loved his sheikh. And the sheikh Sunbul Effendi was getting old and wanted to designate a successor, somebody who will take over the place where they would sit, postnishin, somebody sitting on the sheepskin, which is the sign of the sheikh's position in the Turkish tradition. Of course, the murids all really wanted to know who's going to be in charge. Will it be me? Will it be him who's in charge of me? It was a big thing as the sheikh grew old, and the sheikh announced, "Today I will decide. I want all of my murids to go out into Istanbul and to the gardens around here and to bring back to me the most beautiful flower that they can find." And the murids all look at each other, but they all go out. In the end of the day, they come back, and one of them has found the most incredible blue tulip. And places it at the feet of Sumbul Effendi. And another one has found this incredible Narcissus, and nobody's ever seen anything like it. But Mirkaz Effendi, that little dusty Murid, isn't there, and eventually he comes just before the Azan for Maghrib, and he brings a dead flower, a dead rose, and he puts it in front of his Shaykh. And everybody says, "What's that?" And Sumbul Sinan says, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh my Shaykh, I went out into Allah's world, and I saw all of the flowers making tasbih, praising their Lord, and I was ashamed to stop them. Then I found one that had stopped its tasbih, so I brought that one." So of course, he became the Shaykh, Mirkaz Effendi, and is loved right next door by the people of Istanbul to this day. So this khurram, the delight that the world has in its Lord, which is a very Quranic doctrine, is something that is very essential to Rumi's prescription of how we ourselves can find happiness. Just be that happy human part of Allah's happy world. Verse 5. هزار صورت جنبان به خواب میبینی چو خواب رفت نبینی ز خلق دیاری. به خواب میبینی, in your sleep you see 1,000 jumbled or shifting images. When the sleep is over, when sleep is done, نبینی ز خلق دیاری, you don't see amongst creation or amongst mankind a single person remaining. This is a good example of a difficult verse in the Divan. So let's at least try and unpack the vocabulary. Again, it means 1,000 shifting images do you see in your sleep. This is heaven talking to us. When sleep is done, you see not one dweller among mankind. Well, sleep is certainly common in the language of Sufism and in Rumi's tradition. Zain charqi dolabi tot amad geran khabi tura feryad azin umre sebki zinhar azin khab geran. From the heavenly spheres a heavy sleep, khab geran, fell upon you. Moan for this light life, beware of this sleep so heavy. So his image here is that life is something spiritual, evanescent. Consciousness is this sort of wafer-thin, gossamer entity. Sometimes it's hardly there. Sleep is this big, heavy thing that comes upon us. How can we manage when there's such weight placed upon this delicate thing that's called consciousness? What's the solution? ای دل سوی دیلدار شو ای یار سوی یار شو ای پاسبان بیدار شو خفته نشاید پاسبان. O heart, to the beloved, O friend, to the friend, ای پاسبان, O watchman, بیدار شو, stay awake. It is not right for a watchman to sleep. ای عاشقان ای عاشقان هنگام کوچ است از جهان در گوش جانم میرسد طبل رحیل از آسمان صلی ربی علی النبی الهاشم المطلب صاحبي أصف نسبي وآله وصحبه نگذار بان برخسته قطار ها آرسته از محلال خسته چه خفته ایر ای کاروان صلی ربی علی النبی الهاشم المطلب صاحب اصف نسبه وآله وصحبه این بانگه ها از پیش و پس بانگ رحیل است و جراس هر لحظه نفس و نفس سر می کند در لامکان صلی ربی حال النبی الهاشم المنطلبی صاحب اصف نسبی و آله و صحبه ای دل سوی دل دار شو ای یار سوی یار شو ای پاسبان بیدار شو خفته نشاید پاسبان صلی ربی علی النبی الهاشم المنطلبی صاحب اصف نسبی و آله و صحبه. That was the easy bit. Let me try and translate that. The tune, incidentally, is by Ali Ufqi, who was a Polish Muslim who was captured in the Crimea in the 17th century. But he'd been a court musician in Poland, and he became a court slave at the Enderun school in Topkapı in Istanbul, and learnt Turkish music and became an important composer for the religious orders, particularly Aziz Mahmud Huday. If you visit that place in Üsküdar, he became from the Jalwati Tariqa. And he's interesting, one of the great innovative Ottomans. Ali Ufqi was the first one ever to derive a notation for Islamic music. He actually wrote it down, which is difficult because Islamic music doesn't just have 12 semitones in the octave like Western music, but it has more subtle gradations, quarter tones, microtones. It doesn't have harmonies, perhaps as a result of that, but it has these extraordinary 200 or 300 modal systems, and many of the sheikhs buried here were masters of that modal system. So Ali Ufqi, an important figure with his Majmu'a Saz Söz, which means the anthology of words and music, which still exists. We have a copy in the British Library in London, and the music from that era is hence, as a result, accessible to us. And there is a number of groups here in Istanbul who have recreated the music that he was composing. Anyway, that's one of his tunes. So, what does it mean? Ey ashiqan, ey ashiqan. This is about the metaphor of sleep. How do we wake up? Well, ey ashiqan, O lovers, Hengami kuchest az jihan. Now is the time to leave the world behind. Dar gushi janam mirasad tabli rahil az asiman. My ear, the ear of my soul, is reached by the drum of departure from heaven. And everybody knows in Rumi's tradition what this means. It means he's on a journey. The caravan, in the morning when the caravan is about to set out, or if it's traveling by night, in the evening, there's a drum to make sure that everybody is ready to depart. So he's saying, my soul hears this drum of departure. It means death, the inevitability of death, but also the possibility of dying in a certain way before that final departure. So that's heard, audible to my ear. The leader of the caravan, Sareban, or the camel driver, has stood up and he has made the line of animals straight. Azma Helali Khaste, and has asked for permission from us, or asked us to forgive him. In other words, he's going around waking us up, saying the caravan's about to leave. Che khufteid, a caravan. You caravan travelers, why are you still asleep? So somebody is, as it were, hitting us with a stick. This is important because, of course, this could be the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam waking us up so that we can travel. It could be the Shaykh. It could be the spiritual guide. It could be the voice of heaven itself. In bangeha az pishu pas. These sounds in front and behind, bangira hilist ujaras, are the sounds of departure and the bells. So he's talking, I don't know if he's talking about the caravan driver making the noises, or just everything that you hear in the world is like the bells which indicate that the caravan is moving on. That's how you should use your goshe-jan, the ear of your soul. Everything that you hear is telling you this is all passing away. In every moment, nafs wa nafas, a soul and a breath, sar mikonat dar la mekan, is traveling to la mekan, the place that is not a place. So you hear noises in the world, and that should remind you that in every moment somebody is traveling on to that place that is not a place. Incidentally, if you sometimes hear in Istanbul, and you can hear it here sometimes, and from the place where we're staying, something that sounds like an azan that's coming from the minaret, it's not at the time of the azan, you can't work out what he's saying, they still maintain the tradition here of announcing from the minaret the death of a local person. So if somebody from the neighborhood of that mosque has just died, the muezzin's job is to announce that and to call down Allah's mercy on him, and sometimes to announce the place where the janazah is going to be held. So that's what that sound is. So Rumi is saying the whole world is doing that. Everybody's moving on at every moment. Okay, so then he talks a bit about the dangers of this sleep. And then, Ey dil soye dildar sho. O soul, seek the one who ravishes the soul. Ey yar soye yar sho. O friend, go to the friend. Ey pasban bidar sho. O watchman, wake up, be wakeful. It's not right for a watchman to fall asleep. That takes us back to the point that Rumi is making in this particular ghazal. We are kind of sleeping, but the caravan's going to move on, and we have to join it, and we have to do so from a position of consciousness, and everything actually is reminding us, saying, wake up, you're going to die. Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Every soul shall taste of death. You can't do anything at all about that. Allah has decreed its time and its place and its why and its wherefore. That is set. Wake up. Don't sleep. Don't hang around, because this world is full of treats, but it's not about those treats. And then the second half of this verse 5, how does it go? When the sleep is gone, you don't see anybody amongst humanity. Now, dayar, rather unusual word in Persian, and presumably what Rumi is reaching for is the dua. I think it's the dua of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam. Rabbi la tadhar ala al-ardi min al-kafirina dayara. Oh Allah, do not leave one dweller upon the earth of the unbelievers. So, knowing that his audience were aware of that usage of this slightly unusual word, dayyar, Rumi is saying that once that sleep is gone, you won't see anybody staying amongst mankind. Nobody's going to hang around. If they're awake and they can see the caravan moving, they're all going to head for that, because that's where it's at. They're only not joining the caravan of reality, the caravan that in this world, in places such as this, will take them from the sleep, khabi ghaflat, sleep of forgetfulness, to reality. The only reason why they're not joining that precious caravan from dream to truth is because they're in sleep. So you need the man with the stick to wake them up.